GOP still looking to pass its health care legislation despite opposition from 9 Republican senators. Senator Rand Paul criticized the bill for its spending. Watch this.
So, I mean, the bill is just being lit up like a Christmas tree full of billion-dollar ornaments, and it's not repeal. We don't repeal the regulations. We don't repeal the subsidies. Now there are Republicans getting so weak-kneed, they're saying, oh, we're afraid to repeal the taxes. What happened to these people? They all were for repealing Obamacare. Now there's virtually no one left.
This as President Trump seemed to endorse first repealing the Affordable Care Act and then passing new legislation later if the Senate fails to pass a replacement. Joining me now is former Texas Congressman and former Republican presidential candidate, Dr. Ron Paul. Senator, what do you make of your son's comments on the GOP downfall, if you will?
I agree. No doubt I agree. But I also understand the system, and I'm sure he does too, that it's very, very difficult. And that is the problem. How do you reverse things? And this isn't just reversing Obamacare. This is reversing a principle that government should be involved in our lives to the extent it is, especially in medical care. And Republicans have never been good at that. They have expanded government and medical care all along. So it's the principle on whether they should be involved. Once it gets massive and abusive and outrageous like Obamacare, there's a rebellion, but they don't rebel against the principle. They think that they can just tinker with it, and Rand's dealing with the principle of it. That this is very, very difficult.
Dr. Paul, I want to jump in here because when you say Republican principles, increasingly that is an oxymoron. When you have senators, and your son, Senator Rand Paul, pointed this out, when you have senators saying we need to keep in place a major tax increase on capital formation in this country, and Rubio has said he'd get on board with it, Senator Rounds, even Bob Corker, when you have senators saying that, they need to hand in their Republican cards.
Yeah, well, one of my beefs over the years, and it continues to be, is that we have way too much bipartisanship. And the bipartisanship is exactly what you're talking about. They both believe in government, medicine, spending, these programs. They believe in the same foreign policy. They believe in the same monetary policy. They believe in the welfare system, too. So it's very bipartisan, and they pretend there's a big difference. All we have to do is put the Republicans in, and they're going to cut taxes, cut spending, cut regulation. We're going to go back to the free market, and we're going to obey the Constitution. Well, that's a fallacy. I think we need we just had the 4th of July. I think we have to have a real revolution someday and revolt against the type of system that we've had. And I don't think it's just these, this administration or the last one. I think it's happened for 100 years. And most people realize that we just didn't get here overnight. It's the progressive principles, and it isn't a Republican principles. Republicans have not been good.
Dr. Paul, it's Harlan Hill has a question for you.
Dr. Paul, so Obama knew that he couldn't get single-payer health care when they did Obamacare back in his first administration. But they knew that they could give an entitlement that people would not want to give up. And that's exactly what we're wrangling with at this point in time. So Republicans are caught in a very difficult spot where they don't want to claw something back that people have come to expect. Whether it's, pre-existing conditions or an expansion of Medicaid, Medicare. It's going to be very hard to claw that back. How do Republicans realistically contend with that? Because it's going to be unpopular to take things back from people, to arrest it.
Yeah, and it won't be all at once. I mean, you're right. There's too much dependency on it. It was deliberate because what's happening now probably doesn't bother the single-payer people. There'll be more chaos than ever. And I say the only thing we can do is just turn everything over to the government. So I think that they will not claw back. But what you could do is legalize bits and pieces of liberty where people can say, look, I want to opt out. I want my liberty. I want my independence. I don't need to government to take care of me from cradle to grave. Why do you force me into it? For one reason, the people who are decent have to pay for it, and that's why they won't let you. In a libertarian society, we permit voluntary socialism, but a socialist never permits voluntary freedom, and that's where the dilemma is, and they're always maneuvering, and it's not a partisan issue. There's always somebody in both parties who are behind the scenes, making these plans. There's nobody really personally, other than Rand and a few others, think that maybe on principle, we ought to get the government out of this and have a different system. But when I started medicine, you know, back in the early 60s, we had no Medicare, no Medicaid, and actually it wasn't all that bad. We saw nobody dying in the streets without medical care, and it existed for, you know, 150 years. I mean, it's a recent event that we've had this monster.
Lindsay, one of the dangers with Medicare, and the messaging from Democrats is going to be Medicare for all in terms of pushing us towards single payer, is it's too generous. And it's got a $50 trillion unfunded liability. The hospital trust fund goes broke in 11 years when benefits automatically get cut to 87 cents on the dollar. I mean, that's the reality of it, is that it's too generous. And if we're doomed to go in that direction with all of health insurance in this country, we'll be bankrupt very quickly.
Oh, absolutely. This country will be bankrupt. The deficit will continue to grow. I know that's Rand's one of his major issues with this repeal legislation that the Senate is looking at right now. My question to you, Ron, is what does happen? What is the likelihood of a repeal and then a clean replace?
I don't think there's hardly any. I think Dagan's point, I think, made the point that it's all going to go bankrupt. And, yeah, they can't tinker and manage it differently. It doesn't work that way. So whether it's in the monetary system, or foreign policy, or medical care, I work on the assumption, yes, I want to present the case for what we should do our best and take anything we can get. But in the meantime, prepare for the bankruptcy, because it will come and we'll have our way. We'll get rid of government medicine. But under those circumstances, more people suffer than if we just legalize, you know, the right to take care of ourselves. But people aren't willing to do that.
Ron,
so I think that we're going to see the big bankruptcy first.